Hello, this is Daryl Ehrlich with the Billings Gazette, and this is our Vietnam Voices series, a project of the Billings Gazette sponsored by Masterlube. It is September 28th, and today I am happy to have in studio Roger Thomsen. I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's got a neat story. He did something pretty unique in Vietnam that we haven't had as part of this series. I will tell you that he was in the Army from 1968 to 1970. And Roger, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Roger, let's start before 1968. What were you doing before 1968, and where were you?
Well, I was in college. I've been in college. Had graduated and had entered graduate school at the University of Montana.
Okay.
And at that time, everybody was subject to the draft. But if you're going to school, you got a student deferral, which I had. And when I started graduate school, they were still allowing deferrals for graduate students, and they changed their mind. So I knew that it was time to make a decision and do something different.
Yeah. What were you going to graduate school for?
Business.
Business? Okay.
Yeah.
And was Montana home for you?
Well, I grew up in Michigan.
Okay.
But I had been in Montana off and on. I came to Montana to work in Yellowstone Park to start with, and just decided that was the place that Montana was where I wanted to end up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So University of Montana is a pretty good place. So the U.S. Changed its mind about student deferrals for people in graduate school, and you said you knew you had to do something. What was that something that you did?
Well, I knew I was going to be drafted, or I could make a decision myself to get in. And at that time, I thought being an officer was probably a good idea. So I shopped the services and enlisted for OCS, Officer Candidate School, in the Army. And ended up at Fort Benning in the OCS program. And about 3/4 of the way through that, it was a 24-week program. The Army and I came to a mutual conclusion that I did not want to be an officer. And
Okay.
at that point, I was given some other choices.
Okay. Was your boot camp basic? So because you were an OCS, was it different than what most guys would have experienced?
No, I was in infantry, signed up for infantry, so I had basic training and advanced infantry training at Fort Ord, California. And then the OCS program was at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay. And so when you decided that, when you had a meeting of the minds, or that OCS wasn't, what were some of your other options?
Well, my options were to immediately go to Vietnam, or they had a program at Fort Benning to train scout dog handlers, and I always did like dogs, so I said, sure, I'd like to work with the dogs, and that was basically a 3-month training program.
Okay.
With the dogs.
And were you, so you were concerned in 1968, you were concerned about the possibility of being drafted. That was a very real thing then.
Yeah, it was, I knew that if I wasn't in school, I'd probably be drafted.
Okay. So let's talk about, were you aware of that there were dogs being used in Vietnam, or that the Army had such a program?
No, not at that point. I hadn't. I don't think I was aware of it.
Okay, and so you go, and let's talk about just the overall program, because I don't think a lot of people, in fact, I wasn't aware until recently that they had such a thing. So back us up and give us a real basic primer on what dogs in Vietnam entailed, or the training, just the whole idea and training behind them.
Well, there are several different kinds of dogs that they use as far as their duties. There's the security dogs that everybody sees around the perimeter of an air base, and they're trained to be fairly ferocious and attack. And then there are scout dogs, which is what I ended up. And scout dog is designed to be an early warning system. Going down the trail in the infantry, the dog and the handler walk first down the trail, essentially walk point. The handler watches the dog. The dog gives signals as he goes down the trail if there's something unusual out there, and he's trained to pick up personnel, explosives, booby traps, anything unusual on the trail. And basically, you're just going down the trail. It's like going out for a walk with your dog, except you're watching what the dog's doing, and the dog's aware that there are dangers out there. He's been trained that he doesn't want to go through a tripwire. He doesn't want to step on explosives. He's trained not to go after personnel if they're out there, but they get so excited that they do break and go after the enemy personnel.
Right.
In some situations.
Yeah. That it's probably a lot like, we'll get into it later, probably a lot like walking a dog, only you're in a war zone too. But
that's true.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah. When you're do they also do the security dogs, do they check for mines too, or is that a different type of?
That's a different type thing.
Okay.
We had a couple dogs in our unit that were specifically trained for mines, and they're trained differently. They're trained to be rewarded by food. At that time they were. I don't know if they still are today. Today there are a lot of dogs trained for explosive detection. But at that time, our dogs, our scout dogs, were trained to be rewarded by affection and attention.
That seems like a pretty fun thing to do. I mean,
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun training, and except for the danger, it was equally fun to be out with your dog in Vietnam.
Right. You had so let's talk about what's the 3 month, so 90-day. Is it a 90-day training period?
It was about a 90-day program at that time.
Is that working more with you or with the dogs, or how does that work? Because it seems like just a different. I mean, I realize when people went to artillery training or infantry training, they were training with the actual, either the weapons or the techniques. What are you doing during your training?
We're trained with the dog from the day we start.
Okay, same dog.
Same dog, and some of the units were trained a whole platoon. There were scout dog platoons was the entity, and in some cases they would start with the dogs and they would ship over with their dogs.
Okay.
As a unit. I went over as a replacement, and consequently my dog did not go with me. I picked up a dog that another handler had already been using in Vietnam, and the other dog had proven himself to be an excellent scout dog, and he worked very well for me also when I got there.
Was it hard leaving the dog that you'd worked with? I mean, I imagine you kind of form an attachment to a dog like that.
Certainly. Yeah, I think all the handlers bonded with their dogs, and when you left or when you lost a dog in combat, it was like losing your best friend,
Yeah. What's the so what do you work on during those 90 days of training? What do you work on? What are some of what do you do during the day, so to speak?
You get up in the morning and clean up around your dog. Generally, we went out in a group with several dogs and several trainees, and we would get out on the trail and work hiking trails and looking for anything out there that would be of danger, and tripwires, personnel. They would put something out there that you were supposed to find, and it could be personnel jumps out behind a tree or something, and usually the dog knew about the person before anybody jumped out, but you were trained to watch the dog. That was your primary job. You had to watch the dog, because the dog goes on a trail and he does what every dog does, just going out for a walk, but you watch him for any unusual alert, they call them. If they know that there's something out there, they'll look at it, they'll lift their head, just a little indication that something different is out there.
And did you, when you were doing this, had you had any experience previous with trained dogs or kind of?
No, I always had dogs, but just a pet dog. We didn't do a lot of try to train him or anything.
Now, you showed me a picture of one of the service dogs you had over there. It looks like or the dog was a German Shepherd, or mostly, or what you're using mostly German Shepherds or Malinois, or? Well,
at that time they were German Shepherds or predominant German Shepherd mix. They didn't have to be purebred. Some of them were. My dog happened to be. Mine was donated by a family in Tacoma, Washington. I found out later, and so the dogs. At that time, the dogs they were using were predominantly German Shepherds for that particular duty.
Okay. And what is so you're going out there in 90 days, you're training. Does a dog take longer than that to train, longer than 90 days, or would most of them?
Most of them would do it 90 days. If the dog wasn't to the stage that they wanted to see him, they would hold him back and assign him a new handler and a new group, and let him go through the program for another 90 days before they shipped him over. Okay.
And so what are you are trained as the soldier that's along with the dog. Are you trained for just reading that dog? Or are you trained for, if you're walking point in an infantry division, are you also trained in kind of combat in that, or what are you being trained in?
Certainly, you're right up front, so you've got to be prepared for combat. Theoretically, when the dog alerts on something, if you have time, you call the guy behind you and say, "There's something out there. I've done my job. Now it's your guy's job to find out what it is that's out there." And that happened several situations. One time we had been landed by helicopters in an area, and we were approaching a little river, and my dog was alerting like crazy. And I said, "Hey, there's somebody on the other side over there." They said, "Okay, we got to go over and find out what it is." And so we got across the river. It was a nice, cold, clear little river like you'd find in Montana, but we got the other side, and we found a spot where somebody had been sitting there watching us eating his lunch. There was pieces of lettuce and things on the ground, greenery that he'd been there, and the dog knew he was there.
Right. Is that a spooky feeling to know that the dog is right?
You're just trained that.
Right. They're going to find
it, and if the dog says there's something there, you better figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Right. Was the so you go through this training, and what do you at the end of it? Then do you have orders to go to Vietnam, or what's tell me what the process was for you, or after 90 days, what do you do?
I was actually initially assigned to a group that was going to go to Korea. They were going to send the first scout dog platoon to Korea, and the time was passing, and they want to get some work out of you, after all their training. So nothing was happening with the unit going to Korea. So at that point, they cut orders for me to go to Vietnam. I was married at the time. I had a chance to go home see my wife for a couple of days, and then get on a plane and a nice commercial jet and fly over to Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam.
What was that must have been hard. You're married and you're going over there. That seems like it's a pretty difficult, for what, 12, 13 months, depending on what the hitch was. I'm asking probably a leading question here, but that must have been difficult, knowing that you're.
Well, it was difficult. It was probably more difficult for my wife, mm-hmm. because she was more worried for me than I was about myself, I guess. And it was hard for her, knowing that I was going over to a combat zone.
Yeah, were you worried about going into a combat zone?
Not particularly. I mean, I was normal apprehension, but I was trained to do the job, and I was going over to do the job.
Right. Was it hard leaving the dog that you trained with for a dog that you hadn't worked with?
No, not particularly. I knew I would be assigned a good dog when I got over there, and I had some thought that I might see that dog over there, and I think I did see him, but it's been so long since I'd worked with him, he didn't really acknowledge me. Yeah.
Right. Is that hard? I mean, most of what you think of when you have pets or animals, a dog, is you bond with them and you have them for, a while. But these aren't really necessarily pets; they're work dogs. Is that correct?
Right.
So how do you keep that? Is there a distance you keep, or do you just enjoy them while you have them, or what's the differences or similarities between having a work dog and a pet?
Well, you're in a training situation when you're not actually working, you're training. And the dogs are, at that time, the dogs were chained out with their own location. They didn't, come in the buildings with it at that time. I think maybe that's changed with dogs today, but but we pretty much work with them. And if we weren't actually working with them, we were in the area generally. The area that the dogs were staked out was right in the center of our little area. Our area wasn't very big. Our platoon was about 30 guys, and about 25 or 30 dogs at any given time.
Right. So you fly into Cameron Bay, and what's your first? Let's talk about the flight in there and your first reactions to Vietnam. You finally get on the ground. It's one thing to see this in headlines. It's another thing, I imagine, to land.
Well, Cameron Bay is a pretty big base, and at that time was fairly secure. They put you into a holding company or whatever until you got your assignment, and then it takes them most of a day to get you assigned. And then they go down the list and they read off your name and where you're going. And got to my name and they said, well, you're going to 101st Airborne. And that kind of gives you a little shiver, because I know that the reputation of 101st as being a real crack unit. And but I was assigned to one of the scout dog platoons that the 101st had, and they had several of them.
Right. Did you, because you knew what you were kind of trained to do, much like, I guess, infantry is trained for infantry, artillery for artillery, but yet you've got a very specific skill that you trained for. Not everybody had them. Not everybody did. Did that lessen your apprehension because you kind of knew, no matter what, I'm going to work with a dog and I'm going to be somewhere rather than who knows?
I think so. We were trained and we knew what we were going to do. The mechanics of it is you went to the platoon and then there was kind of rotation. They had a list that as you got to the top of the list, you were the next to go out on assignment. And a regular infantry unit would call for a dog handler, a dog handling team. And at that point, you'd get on a helicopter and fly out to the unit you were going to work with. And you'd work with them up to about a week. After that, they figured the dog was getting tired, and they'd bring it back so the dog could rest. Didn't care about the handler.
Yeah. So where was the 101st station? Where was kind of a home base for you?
We're right outside of Hue at Camp Eagle, and that's about 30 miles from Laos, and right close to the ocean, and it's less than 100 miles from the DMZ.
Right. That's and so a lot of, I imagine, because you're kind of close to Laos and not far from DMZ, that you're dealing with a lot of they're interested in about NVA infiltration at that.
Yes, we're what they call the Ashaw Valley is right over by the Laotian border, and that was a major part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail where they brought in trucks and so on. We worked, and they're kind of a mountainous area, low mountains, and that's where we worked in the mountains there. That was kind of the same area that you probably heard of Hamburger Hill. That was kind of in the same area. that happened a little bit before I was there. But
right. Did you let's talk about just the scenery and what does it look like there? What can you remember about that?
Well, along the ocean, they have got beautiful beaches, beautiful white sand beaches, and you move inland, and there's agricultural areas, and then you get into foothills and mountains that look a lot like a dry part of Montana. They had pine trees, and we weren't in rice paddies or anything like that when I was working. There were some there, but we were working more into the mountains there.
Yeah. What did it? I mean, were you? Sounds like that. Depending on what platoon needed you, who was going out on what mission, they would call and ask you to come along. So you weren't always working with the same infantry folks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So did you see? I imagine that would have given you more of a variety of jobs and seen probably a little broader scope of the land.
It was pretty much the same area and the same type of operations. We were generally searching for the enemy at that time, and it would be a different platoon, but pretty much a similar job. When you get out there, you get on the ground, and okay, we're going to go. For example, I'd usually fly out with a supply helicopter and get off. Occasionally it was a little stressful when you got off the helicopter. One time I went out, and the platoon I was going to work with had been ambushed at breakfast that day, and they'd had two of their people killed. They were pushing the bodies on one side of the helicopter while I was getting off the other side. And I get on the ground, and the guy said, "Boy, are we glad to see you. We only got 12 guys here." And I went, "Oh, okay." Wow. And these guys are shaking in their boots because of what had just happened to them.
Yeah. Is that, how do you come in a situation like that? First of all, you saw them being loaded on. That's probably uncomfortable. And then you're also going into, it's pretty hot there. That must be stressful and a little chaotic.
It was, and I thought, well, whatever, do the best we can here. And,
right.
And the enemy had evidently backed away at that point, and so we got settled and headed down a trail, and I was walking in front with my dog, and it was kind of a trail through some hills, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm looking and watching the dog, and I look around. The nearest guy to me is 100 yards behind me, and I stopped right there, and I said, "That's not how it works. You're right here, or I don't move." And so we got that straightened out. But they were so scared. The guys were, had been through that morning. They were afraid of getting ambushed again, and but we got them up there, and we stopped for lunch, and we found out that there was somebody following us. We were being followed, and the guy at the back of our group there opened up on them, and at that point they call in a helicopter gunship to try to
take them out.
Yeah.
Was that when you were out there, did you feel, I mean, it's easy to feel alone when the next guy's 100 yards behind you. Did you, because you're walking point, because you're out ahead, not knowing what you're getting into, was it easy to feel like you're always in danger, or what was the feeling most of the time when you're out there?
I guess I was pretty naive. I was just out there doing my job, and pretty much the guys were with me, and I figured, the only time it really bothered me is when the bullets started flying, and then that wakes you up in a hurry.
Yeah. What about when bullets started firing? You've got your dog. How do you try to get the animal back or protect the animal, but then also, do you go into a defensive position too where you have to return fire, or what's the protocol for that?
The first job is to see that the dog is secure and get down, so that if there are things happening around you, that you have the least chance of getting hit, and that happened several times, and primarily I would get down. Luckily, I didn't happen to be right where the action was happening, and so I got the dog down. And one time there were a bunch of big trees there, and he and I were behind a pretty big tree.
Right. Is it hard for dogs in a combat situation? I imagine that's a lot for humans. I mean, there's a lot of noise, a little bit of chaos. How is a dog trained to react, and how does it usually react in those situations?
Well, that's part of the training program with the dogs, that they're used to loud noises. And I'll admit that when I'd open up with my gun, my dogs start jumping around. So if I didn't absolutely have to fire, I would just let the other guys fire and just take care of the dog.
Right. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking, I imagine. What's the when you're going along and you see him, how close is the dog to you, or how close do you stay to the dog, or does the dog go ahead?
Dogs are generally sometimes you work them on leash, and in that case they're probably 5 feet in front of you. We did have our dogs trained to work off leash, and they might be 15, 20 feet ahead of you. The problem with off leash is if they get excited and they see something, they may go after what it is, and we lost some dogs that way. During the time I was there, we had 8 dogs killed.
Because they
would take off and
get shot,
or they'd get blown up. Luckily, during that time, we didn't lose any of our guys.
Right.
Before I was there and after I was there, our unit did lose people. We had 8 guys killed in our unit during the time that it was over there. But we were pretty lucky when during the time I was there. Some of the other guys were out. One of our dog handlers lost his dog, and the guy ahead of him was killed, and the guy behind him was wounded, but he wasn't hit. So
wow. Well, what's the hardest thing about working with a dog in that situation?
I don't know, just keeping control of the dog, I guess.
Yeah. Well, were other units, were the units used to having a dog along with them, or what was that experience like for them?
Well, most of the time they didn't have a dog along, and the typical infantry guy over there would be out in the bush. He might be out in the bush most of 6 months without ever coming back, and all their food was brought into them, all their supplies, and occasionally they get lucky and be brought back to a main base for a couple days, but that was pretty tough duty for straight infantry guys, because they were on the ground and out there. They might be out in the bush 11 out of the 12 months they were assigned over there, and that's I felt for those guys.
Yeah. Did they? I can imagine. In most time, you bring a dog. Heck, you bring a dog into any situation, a home, a work, something like that. People are instantly attracted to the dog, to animals. I don't even know that it's dogs, but dogs especially. What was it like then? Did people want to see the dog? Did they want to see the dog? All these guys. There are not a lot of people who don't have pets at home. Was it hard to keep focus with the dog? Would the dog allow anybody else to get close, or what was kind of the protocol in that?
Oh, it kind of varied. My dog, when we were out in the field, was pretty protective. If he was back in the kennel, anybody could walk in and pet him and play with him. But he was pretty protective when we were out there, and I had him go after a couple guys. One guy threatened to shoot him, which told him we didn't need to do that.
Right.
But he was protective of me when I was out there. And he would, if I encouraged him, he would talk to some of the guys. But he was looking after me, and I was looking after him.
Yeah. So you go over there, and and you go to the 101st, and you've now got this dog. How do you bond? How do you get to know that dog? Because I imagine it's a little different for every dog, right?
You just go back to training. The dog's trained, you're trained. You just have to go out and work together a little bit, and you work together for a week or so. And there are guys that have been there for a while, go out with you, and when they feel you're ready, then the first mission, there's a guy that walks what we call walk slack with you, and he's there to make sure that you know what you're doing and everything's working okay before they let you go by yourself. And then after you've been there for a while, like toward the end of the time I was over there, I was walking slack for new guys. So it was kind of a progression. That, you start out with somebody.
That's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Just put it down. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You can. Yep. I'll just deaden that mic and.
All right.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
So was it something that was the work in any way? It's hard to say it's enjoyable because it's in a combat zone, but was it fulfilling? Was it a good job to have if you're going to be over there?
Yes, I think it was. You feel like you're accomplishing something, and sure, you've got more danger than the guys sitting back in the base camp or whatever, but it can be very traumatic. Luckily, I wasn't traumatized by anything in particular. I mean, we had some action, but luckily it wasn't really horrific where I was. But you feel like you're doing something that you were trained to do, and I enjoyed the dogs. I enjoyed being out tramping around the hills. I always did a lot of hiking and fishing and things like that. So I was used to being out on a trail, and that part of it was enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you just work with one dog while you were over there, or did you have several?
I just worked with one dog while I was there.
Okay.
I took it over from a handler who was going home when I got there.
Is it hard to leave a dog in Vietnam?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the do you have names for the dogs? Do the dogs have names, or how do you call them? Do you get that?
They all have names. Just normal names. Yeah.
So all the guys that are with you, they're dog handlers too. Most of the ones that you day to day live with.
Yes. Yes.
Does that add? What's that like? Because you all have a pretty common interest in the same. Do you talk about dog training? Do you talk about? I mean, or is it just like, what's the conversation like?
Well, you talk about the mission you just came in from, what went on, what happened, and you kind of, and that way you get a little feedback from the guy who went out and from the people in the rear. During the day, we're still, doing some training with the dogs. In our downtime while we're waiting to go out, we do some casual things, play cards and things. We had an area there that had some tables and chairs, and if there's nothing else to do, you entertain yourself until the next time there's something that needs doing. For a while there, our teams were going out pretty fast, so there weren't that many people in the rear. But sometimes, if things got slow, you'd end up with quite a few guys waiting to go out, and in the meantime, they're just kind of hanging. And
yeah. What was your communication like? So you're married at the time. There are no cell phones. There's no Skype or FaceTime. What's your communication back with family and friends?
Mainly just letters.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was on. They had a radio phone, but I think I only talked to my wife that way one time, and it was kind of an uncomfortable.
Yeah, the old over.
Yeah.
Did she know that you were a dog handler? Did you? What did people think about that? Was that a good thing? Did you get much feedback on that?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you when you're over there? So a normal kind of mission was you'd be inserted with a certain number of troops who were out looking for something. Was that mostly how it went, or was there variety in the type of missions that you did?
That was mostly the way it went. In some cases, you would go out and you go on a combat assault with a group. And a combat assault, generally in the area I was in, would be a helicopter assault, where the helicopters would come in, the Hueys, and pick up you and the guys are going with you and drop you off. And hopefully it wasn't a hot LZ where you're getting shot at when you went on the ground. And occasionally it was a big enough operation that several dog teams would go out at the same time. And usually on a separate helicopter, each dog team would be on a different helicopter. And meanwhile, you're getting feedback of what's happening to the other guys. And one of our guys was on a helicopter that made a hard landing. Nobody was injured, but the helicopter lost power and went down. And luckily, it just hit the ground and bounced. So
right. What is it fun working with other dogs? I mean, are you kind of working with other dogs, and was there that opportunity to work together as a team?
Pretty much the dogs work individually.
Okay.
So they're assigned to a different group. Occasionally it's you're in proximity to another unit, but the dog itself works individually.
Okay. Yeah, are the one of the things that I've heard, especially about infantry, is a lot of times they don't try to make a lot of extra noise. Are the dogs, do they make any sound when they're going? Are they trained to no barking? No.
They're trained to be quiet. They don't bark.
You're also all the signals that you're looking for, all the alerts are all, for lack of better, body,
Right, body language.
Okay.
And you're trained to use hand signals with the dogs to get them to do what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. Go ahead or stay down or whatever.
Right. Was the do they give different body signals for different things? Did they alert differently for different situations?
Yeah. It was kind of and then you had to watch the dog, and he'd give an indication of where the danger was by where he looked, or where he was focusing his attention.
And you more often than not, you were looking for was it enemy, or were you looking for anything else? Is there any other things that you were looking for in those situations?
Just primarily enemy and booby traps.
Okay.
My dog found one day, that same day that we crossed that little river and found somebody had been watching us, we went up the trail a little ways, and he would go up and he'd come back, and he'd go up and he'd come back, and he wouldn't go through. And I said, there's something up there. And there was a tripwire with a grenade on the end of it that he had found would not go through. It was late in the day, and we were at the base of a pretty good-sized mountain, and we could see that there were actual formal latrines dug there, and we were walking into a base camp. So it was late in the afternoon, it was starting to rain. We just turned and went straight up the mountain and got out of there because we were walking into, we were a platoon-sized unit, which might have been 20 guys, walking into a base camp. And we didn't know if they were still there, but obviously somebody had been there watching us, so
I bet that was spooky.
It was. That one was spooky. We went up as far as we could, and it was getting dark, and we stopped and rested, and then we finally got up a flat area and spent the night there. In the morning, they called in artillery over our heads, and some of the shrapnel was actually hitting the trees above our heads because they had called in what we had found, and they were trying to drop some artillery in there on it. Wow.
Were there other times when you thought, when you're out walking around, I'm not going to make it back here. This is going to get too heavy, too hot?
No, I never had that feeling. Yeah.
Did you? Did the other guys who were out there, did they appreciate what the dogs could do?
They did. most cases they really did. I went with one unit that I don't know if they were really happy to have me or not, because they kind of went ahead and did their own thing, and I was just there as company, I think.
Right. Right. Is it like it must have been fun? Maybe fun's not the right word, but you get to go. It's almost like a hike in the woods with your dog, and yet the stakes are much higher. It had to be a little surreal. On one hand, kind of nice, but
certainly is. And when you knew you were supposed to be going in on a helicopter, one situation, it was time for us to get out of there. Said, well, the supply helicopter's coming in up on top of this huge sand dune, is what it was. But you got to get up there before the last helicopter gets in if you want to get out. And it was a huge sandy hill, and if you try to climb a sand hill, you're one step forward and two steps backwards, but the dog and I both decided we wanted to get out of there, so we got off that hill.
Maybe awkwardly, but you got up?
We made it up there and got on the helicopter and got out of there. Another time, I was out walking a guy's slack, and similar situation, the wind was getting bad, so they weren't going to have like one more helicopter in. And the guy had let his dog off. He was a new guy, and he'd let his dog off the leash, and the dog was kind of wandering around. Well, when the helicopter came in, dogs love to ride helicopters.
Really?
Just like riding a pickup truck.
I would have guessed the other. I would have guessed
they love,
altitude and noise would not be there.
They love to ride helicopters. But anyway, I was near where the helicopter was coming in, and the dog was loose. Well, the dog ran and got on the helicopter, so I got on the helicopter, and the handler who was assigned that dog didn't make it. He had to spend another night out there, and the dog and I got back to the base camp. But
would they? You see all those pictures of guys riding helicopters, and they wouldn't necessarily dangle out the helicopters, but would dogs want to put their? Is it any different than trucks? Would they want to put their face out?
Pretty much the same thing. We flew with the doors off on those,
right?
So that it was wide open, and the dogs liked it. And I never wrapped the leash fully around my hand, because if the dog wanted to go, he's going by himself. Right. just in case he should get overzealous and fall out or something.
That's funny that they like helicopters.
Oh, they love it. It's just like taking your dog for riding a pickup truck. They're raring to go and excited about it, and same thing with the dogs and the helicopters.
Would have not guessed that. So when you let's talk a little bit about could the dogs handle any kind of terrain? Do they handle? I imagine they handle it better than we do.
Oh yeah, they got 4-wheel drive.
Right. Is there anything that they couldn't do, or things that you'd think twice about taking them into?
Not in our area. Some of the areas where there was a lot of swampy land and so on, it was probably a lot harder for them to work. But our area, there were rice paddies and so on down by the coast, but the area that I was working in, it was fairly good footing. And
did you have to spend nights out with the dog on these missions?
Oh yes, yeah.
How would I've heard at night, you've got guard duty. It's you listen for any sound during the night, all of those kind of things. How was that different with a dog, and how did you manage, at that point, how did a dog react? How do you feed a dog in the field? All of that. How do you take care of a dog when you're out there for?
Well, the dogs, if you pull guard duty with the guys, the dog's with you, and theoretically the dog's going to be watching, but the dogs are used to sleeping at night, Okay. So the first mission I went out there, and I thought, the dog's going to help me watch. The dog wouldn't sleep while I watch. He said, "It's my bedtime." Right.
Your guard duty.
But we had to carry all the dogs' food and water, in addition to our own food and water. So our pack was pretty heavy, and we would carry up to 20 magazines of ammunition and that's 20 rounds in each magazine. So our packs were pretty heavy when you started out, and generally we would carry, in the rear area, we gave the dogs a mixture of canned and dry dog food. When we went on a mission, we carried just canned dog food for the dogs, 1 can a day. So the dog really wasn't getting as much as they wanted, but you're feeding them that much each day. Mm-hmm. We just slept wherever you landed. Sometimes, a lot of times, the unit would move right at dark, so that if somebody's watching, they wouldn't know exactly where you were. And one time I ended up sleeping on literally a rock pile with rocks 6 inches in diameter. And
that sounds miserable.
I was.
Can you use the dog as a pillow at least?
He wouldn't like that too well. he will cozy up to you. But,
right. Yeah. So let's talk about leaving Vietnam. When did you get orders to leave Vietnam, and was that hard?
It was exciting.
Yeah.
Get to come home. I was going back to graduate school when I came back. So
you done your time?
I'd done my time, and I got out, and I'd like to get you out on the last day of the month. So August 31st was my last day, and I was back.
1970?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was back in graduate school before the 1st of October.
Wow.
So it was just.
Was it hard to get back?
No. It was. They flew us into Fort Lewis, Washington, and from there, after they processed us, I got on a plane at SeaTac, and my wife was in Santa Barbara, so I flew to San Francisco and then down to Santa Barbara, and got in there at 9 o'clock at night, and it was getting dark, and she was about the only one there waiting for anybody. So
that must have been fun to be back home.
Oh, good. Yeah.
What was Vietnam a good thing for you?
Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know. I suppose it's one of the life's experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the greatest lesson from Vietnam was for you?
Personal toughness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could handle things.
Yeah. Were there happy memories from Vietnam? I know that seems incongruous sometimes when you say, are there happy times? But people.
I made a lot of good friends there. Yeah. We've had some reunions since that time, so I've seen some of the guys fairly recently.
Yeah. What do you remember about sights and smells and sounds of Vietnam? What are some of the things that stick with you?
Well, when we first got there, they were put us on a truck to take us to where they were getting us oriented to the country, and we went through Hue, and that was same year after Tet. Well, no, it was a year and a half later. But Hue had been a tough battle zone. But the rivers there, they were full of garbage. They were just open cesspools, and that really didn't impress me.
Right, especially coming from places like Montana, where.
Right. Yeah, I did. We had to go down to Da Nang to pick up a couple of trucks, and I rode down in the back of a deuce and a half, and it was pretty interesting. We went through some little fishing villages, and it was pretty interesting. And at that time, we didn't get shot at, so that was a good thing.
Right.
But we went down. There's a pass that you go over coming into Da Nang, and that was interesting.
Yeah. How often, is when you're going out, because you're searching out for the enemy, most of the time do you find the enemy, or are there times when you're just walking around in
There you never know.
Okay.
There are times when you don't find anything. There are other times you just find a couple guys, and they go one way and you go the other way, and as a soldier, you hope you don't find too big a group.
Right. You hope you find it.
Upstairs wants you to find them, but
right, but there's a limit to firepower and people there too. Yeah. Is it when you were over there, what did you find yourself missing about home? Besides I imagine your wife.
Mainly
But,
my wife.
yeah. Yeah. Was there anything about Montana or home that you said, you know what, I didn't realize how much I liked whatever?
Well, I from the time I first came to Montana, I've been in love with Montana. So I had Montana on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got back, you're back in classes and so really reacclimating wasn't hard for you. You didn't?
Wasn't too hard. I've been home few weeks, and my wife said, "You've changed," and I was jumpier. I was a little less tolerant of things going on around me, before going in the Army, college, you sometimes you do real good, and sometimes you don't. You got back, all I wanted to do was finish and get the classes done. I was a very good student when I got back.
Really? So not all bad what you learned, but yeah. Did you agree with her that you had changed? I mean, when people...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people had heard that, they said, I didn't think I did, or, maybe later agreed, but...
Yeah, I think I did. I may have mellowed since then, but it made me a little tougher, maybe a little more decisive.
Right. What was your best memory from Vietnam?
Don't know.
Okay.
Just the whole thing, I guess. Working with the guys, my fellow dog handlers.
Were there better dogs to have? Were there good dogs and bad?
Oh yeah, my dog was a very good dog. There was one dog we had that he was on the side of vicious, and if another dog got near him, he'd tear him up. You didn't go in. You didn't talk to that dog.
Wow.
Yeah, he was. He had his own way of doing things, and his handler could handle him, but anybody else, just stay away.
Was it? One of the things I've even seen pictures of. There are a lot of dogs in Vietnam. Did these dogs ever come across other dogs from around, or were there just no one else around you? And if so, what would happen?
Not usually. Occasionally, there was a Vietnamese dog that was brought in. Of course, we were on a fairly good sized base, so we weren't commingling with the Vietnamese at that time. There were a couple of guys who managed to get a Vietnamese dog and keep it for a mascot or something.
Right. Did I imagine, and maybe this is just the animal lover in me, if I'm on a base and there's some dogs, I want to go over and pet them. Was that tolerated, or did anybody else ever get to play with, pet the dog?
People generally didn't come in.
Okay.
If somebody's there and you wanted to show them your dog, that was fine. You take them over and say, this is my dog, and if the dog was friendly, and most of our dogs were friendly, because
their reward was love and affection. So they're
right.
Yeah. So do you still did this when you got back home and now today? Do you still work with dog training? Is that something that carried over, or was that just that part of your life?
I have dogs, but I don't spend a lot of time training.
Right. They're more pets.
They're more pets. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have, what kind of dogs do you have now?
German Shepherds.
All right. I just thought I'd ask that question. Old habits die hard.
Right. What is
it about the breed that makes them good for that particular work?
They're very intelligent and very adaptable. They're adaptable to climate change also. They can add fur or shed fur fairly rapidly, adjust to a warm climate or a cold climate, and just very intelligent. And German Shepherd works off of airborne scent, whereas like a black lab, we had a unit next to us from the Air Force that was black labs, and they were tracker dogs, and they work off of a ground scent, whereas the German Shepherd works more airborne scent.
Interesting. Are they so the climate's a big thing over there too. Was it hard for you to adjust to the climate? And what was the climate where you're at? Because it's different depending on where you are in Vietnam.
Yeah, it was hot.
Okay.
It was hot, and of course you get the monsoon season, and you get a lot of wet, and sometimes it was wet and soggy out there, but it was hot. I don't, we never knew exactly what the temperature was, but I would guess it was probably plus 90 and very humid.
Right. When you're over there, and obviously you're drafted or not drafted, you join, but you know that the war, as far as public sentiment's not necessarily popular in all corners. How does that affect what you did over there? Does that affect morale at all? Do you know about it? Oh
yeah, we knew about it. While I was there, the Stars and Stripes is the weekly newspaper, and here on the front page was my bank in Santa Barbara, California, being burned to the ground by anti-war protesters.
Wow. What's that like reading about that? Something you know and see, and you're sitting over thousands of miles away.
That's pretty
tough.
Pretty tough, yeah.
Yeah.
And we knew that there was a fair amount of anti-war sentiment by 1970.
Did you encounter any of that when you got back?
Oh.
No? What's looking back, almost 50 years from when we commit combat troops to Vietnam, you've had a whole lifetime to look back and reflect. And how do you see the Vietnam War now with the passage of time?
Well, at the time, I guess I understood why we had gone in there. It wasn't up to me to make a political, a decision. And I guess I guess in retrospect, a little bothered that the anti-war movement was so strong that we really didn't do all we could have. Looking back, we probably could have won that situation in a couple of years if we'd been allowed to.
Yeah. Was it looking back on it? Are there either film or movies, TV, literature? Are there things that you look back and say, yeah, that was kind of that movie or that book or that whatever that resonates with what I felt or saw in Vietnam?
Yeah, there's one, I can't remember the name. It was one of the Vietnam movie. It was they had some night ambushes, and can't remember the name of the movie, but it was the one where the guys are on the ground and the helicopter trying to get them out, and I can't explain it, but that movie, there were some fairly realistic representations of things that happened.
Yeah. Do you so when you came home, you didn't experience that sentiment. What's been your experience being a Vietnam vet? Is it something that you've talked about or shared with, or what has been your experience with being a Vietnam vet?
When I got back, nobody particularly wanted to talk about it, so I didn't talk about it for a long time. My close friends, we just went on with life, and they didn't really seem to be particularly, even my family, not particularly interested in talking about it. And in recent years, I've gotten back together with the guys in my unit there, and that's been good, I think.
Yeah. Has there been a change in sentiment, do you think, and people wanting to listen or hear about that?
Maybe. Everybody wants to say thank you for your service now. Well, that's, I don't know.
Right.
Too little, too late.
Fair enough. Did you, when you were over there, were you hurt or injured at all during your time there?
No.
Was that something that was even in the back of your mind while you were over there, or is that just how's one day to the next? How do you keep on doing that?
Just one day at a time, straight ahead, and never really thought about it. I mean, if I got injured, I got injured.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess I was a little older than some of the guys. I had my 27th birthday in Vietnam, so and maybe that helped me have a little more perspective.
Yeah. So, do you think being older was maybe a good thing over there, if such?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Does looking, one of the things that we've done here is look back, but going forward, one of the reasons we're doing this is so that people can remember, and when people want to study Vietnam and when they want to hear about it, they can hear people who are connected to Montana, who lived in Montana, speak about being over there. And so, when they look ahead, maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, what do you hope people remember about Vietnam from a guy who was over there?
I guess just remember the sacrifices that our people did.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's hard to do is we've got this really intense period in anyone's life, and yet we sit down and for this interview and we say, we're going to talk about this and condense it in a very short period. What about your story have I missed? What haven't I covered?
I think we pretty well covered it.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Well, I just want to say thanks for coming in and sharing your story. This is really interesting. I don't think a lot of people, well, I can speak for myself, didn't know a whole lot about the dogs being used in combat. I don't think that's what we think about a lot, but I think it's fascinating, and without you, I couldn't have helped share that story. I hope that it's meaningful for other people. So thanks so much, Roger. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.